Today we have the privilege of hosting Jerome Elam. Mr. Elam, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, was subject to abuse, sex trafficking, and domestic violence as a child. He's going to share his experience with us today, as well as telling us about the worldwide crisis of sexual exploitation. We'd just like to thank you initially for coming to the school today and sharing your story. Yourself having gone through what you did, we really find it inspiring. So you were just 5 years old when you began being trafficked. It must have been so hard to be taken advantage of at such a young age. Can you talk about the leading factors in your life at that time that led to the unfortunate series of events that followed?
Absolutely. So, again, like I say, unfortunately, my story is like so many others. I came from a family that was full of child abuse, domestic violence, alcoholism, and drug abuse. My mother was pregnant at 17. She married my biological father, and he joined the Army to actually help pay for the medical bills of me being delivered. He was deployed overseas in the 1960s, returned home. My first memory as a 3-year-old is the sound of my father's hand hitting my mother's face. It's been a very difficult journey for me, but I've been very fortunate to survive and then thrive after what happened. And I really think that, my children have really healed me the most in terms of my experience. But there's always been something inside me, which I call hope, that has never been extinguished. It's always been there, and it was a voice that whispered to me every day that I was trafficked, that I would make it to the next. And so I really believe that hope is something that's deep inside all of us, and it can go from a pilot light to a flame that gives us a passion to change the world.
So obviously this did take a massive toll in your life, and you just explained that. And it took you a long period of time to be able to speak out after this. How did the experiences you were subject to affect you in the aftermath of your situation?
I struggled for a long time with many things, and it was only through 25 years of talk therapy that I was able to recover. But when you come from an environment such as being trafficked, there's so many things in your life that you have to redefine. You have to understand what healthy love is, because for so long, especially growing up in a dysfunctional setting, you have a really disjointed sense of what love is. You think, people beating you and forcing you to have sex, and you're being told that's love, and it's not. So I redefined what love is, and I really accepted healthy love in my life. I learned to trust people, which, as a survivor, that's one of the most difficult things, is to trust people. And I learned to accept every day as a new beginning. Every day for anybody is a blank page. And we start over, we can make it anything we want. I don't care what happened to you, as a child or as an adult, every single day is a new chance for you to define yourself.
I think there's a common misconception that traffickers are particular types of people, and that the issue of sex and human trafficking is one that belongs to third world countries. Can you tell us about the magnitude of the crisis worldwide?
Absolutely. Right now, over 40 million people are victims of human trafficking. And 2 to 3 million of those are children. So people are being exploited in every country in the world. It's a very lucrative endeavor. Traffickers make millions and millions of dollars a year from selling children. So it's been pervasive through every single country. In Switzerland also, I think there are around 3,000 people being trafficked. So it happens, in terms of labor trafficking, like, housekeepers, sex trafficking, organ trafficking, child soldiering, and forced begging. So it's very pervasive, and we've seen an increase worldwide just because it's so profitable. And again, like I say, in the States, the gangs have stopped dealing drugs and started selling humans, because you can only sell a drug once. You can sell a human 20 to 48 times a day, according to the Polaris Project. So it's so lucrative that it's just become pervasive, and every single person is a potential victim.
So I was particularly taken aback by an article you wrote for the Washington Times in 2012, and that was about how the occurrence of natural disasters like earthquakes can lead to sort of like a gathering of pedophiles who are hoping to exploit the children who have been separated by their parents. Do you think stories like those go perhaps under-noticed or...
Absolutely. So I think they've gained a lot more attention, because I know when I wrote that article, there were only a couple of organizations that were actually implementing protocols to protect kids. Now it's become more pervasive, because one of the things that I mentioned in the article is that during the Indonesian tsunami in Banda Aceh, Australia caught 20 convicted sex offenders getting on a plane to go to Banda Aceh and actually molest kids. So we've gotten better about recognizing there's a problem, and I know that we've actually tracked that type of behavior all the way back to Mount St. Helens in the United States. So now what we have is we have protocols that establish a rallying point for children after natural disasters. But, again, we can never raise too much awareness. And, for instance, Haiti has been a real difficult situation when there's a hurricane or natural disaster there. So we're really trying to get boots on the ground there to help protect our kids. But I think we can do better by making sure that every child is protected after a natural disaster and getting help in as quickly as possible.
You spent a lot of time since writing for Community's Digital News and the Washington Times, sharing your story. What sort of responses have you gotten, and how is that for you?
Oh, wow. I have to tell you that, when I first began writing for the Washington Times, I wrote the article because, Jerry Sandusky in the States was found to have been molesting young boys from a charity he founded. And I got so angry, I said, I've got to do something. So I wrote an article and I sent it out, and it got picked up by the Washington Times. Well, at the time, I was really angry. And then after a while, when the anger had kind of dissipated, I said, oh my gosh, I put myself out publicly. But, the first person I heard from was a 65-year-old man in London who had never told anybody he had been molested as a child. So it's been an incredible response. I can't tell you how many people contact me and say, I'm shaking right now because you just told my story. Because one of the really egregious facts about human trafficking is that many victims don't know they're being trafficked. I mean, it becomes their normal. They don't understand it. So I've been so just ingratiated with the people that have responded to my articles. And, I have people from South Africa, the UAE, from Pakistan, from Iran, all over the world that contact me. And I just feel, it's such an honor to be a voice for those who have none. And I just hope that I continue to do this and that nobody feels like they have to keep silent about what happened to them as a child.
And how can we, as residents in Switzerland or France, or even speaking to a wider audience, perhaps people worldwide, make some sort of impact concerning whether it's trafficking, domestic violence, or anything?
You're doing it right now. By paying attention to the issue and listening, and you've done a fantastic job of becoming familiar with it. Educate yourself. That's the number one tool, because education is a way to eradicate human trafficking in our lifetime. Because the problem that I run into far too often is that people don't understand that it happens domestically. They want to ascribe human trafficking to Cambodia or Thailand, which does happen in Cambodia or Thailand, but domestically it happens a lot more than we're willing to admit. So we need to realize that in our everyday lives, we can look around through a different lens and see human trafficking. In the States, they found people being trafficked at Subway. So again, it's a matter of learning the signs and then do as you've done beautifully. Write a report about it, do a video about it, write a blog, volunteer with Youth Underground, and become active. Write your politicians, make sure that they understand this is an important issue that you wouldn't let rest. They need to pass laws that make sure that traffickers are put away and victims are protected. So your voice could be very, very instrumental. But I want to say that the way that I go about being an advocate for human trafficking and victims of human trafficking is I do it one victim at a time. Because I think if we look at the overall scope of it, it becomes too overwhelming. So we focus on one victim at a time. And just like saving a penny every day, when you look back after a year, you've got $365. So we work with one victim at a time, one day at a time, and we look around one day and we've accomplished so much.
Finally, by the same token, what are the next steps for the government, say in the US where it's most pervasive, or anywhere else?
Oh gosh, well, the next steps are the area that we need desperate help in is what we call aftercare. When a victim is found, we want to make sure that they have an environment where they feel safe. There's counseling available, there's job training, and they're put on a path to recovery. Because unfortunately, the recidivism rate for victims is close to 50%. So we want to make an environment where they can walk in and feel like they can start their lives over again. And it's what we call a safe house. So we want to make sure there's safe houses that are welcoming to survivors and victims, and that they're going to stay. And if they do leave, they come back. And so we want to make sure that victims are cared for after they're found. And secondly, we want to make sure that there are laws put in place that convict traffickers of that crime and put them away for many, many, many years.
Okay, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Oh gosh, fantastic job.